After 10 years of trying, heartbreak, and unexpected detours, this is a story of how one couple's journey to parenthood finally led to their miracle baby girl. From a rocky love story that began with barely tolerating each other to navigating infertility, PCOS, and a life altering diagnosis, their path was anything but easy. But through faith, resilience, and moments that tested everything they believed, hope never fully let go. This episode is a powerful reminder that even when the odds says impossible, your story is not over. Welcome to
Faith and Fertility Talks,
the podcast where faith grows, hope rises, and testimonies transform. Hi, ladies. I am your host, Gabby, and I am so elated to welcome you to the very first episode of Faith and Fertility Talks. This podcast is a safe space where women will share their testimonies about their fertility journey. Whether you're in the middle of your story or celebrating on the other side, your voice matters here, and I would truly love to have you share it. If you're interested in sharing your story, be sure to check out the link in the episode description below. On this show, you'll hear directly from women sharing their own stories, as well as moments where I will share on their behalf. A little about me. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis and was told that conceiving will be very difficult for me. My testimony is still being written, and I will be opening up and sharing my journey with you along the way throughout this podcast. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode of Johanna's story. Hello, I'm going to tell you my story, how it took my husband and myself 10 years to conceive our beautiful baby girl. My husband and myself met back in 2007, and trust me, it was not love at first sight. As a matter of fact, we couldn't stand each other. One day, he asked everyone at work if they could give him a ride home since he had been in a car accident. He couldn't get anyone to give him a ride home, so he asked me. I refused, as we couldn't stand each other. He said he would pay for the gas, and I said it's not about the gas and that you live further from me. It's the fact of sitting in the car with you. But he convinced me, and I gave him a ride home. On the ride home, we started talking, and I realized he wasn't as bad as I thought. He thought the same of me. Long story short, a few weeks later, he asked me on a date, and I stood him up not once, but 3 times. He finally took me on a date. From that date, I knew he was the man of my life. In 2009, after 2 years of dating, we got married. And 2 years after that, in 2011, we got married by the church. Before we got married by the church, I asked him a couple of questions. I had friends that had gotten married prior to me, and they never asked about children. I knew I wanted to have a kid, just not right away. I was open to the idea, and I needed him to be on the same page as me. He was open to the idea, but we both wanted to make sure our marriage lasted before bringing kids into the mix. We said we will talk about it in a couple of years. Well, in 2012, that marked the 5th year, and we were both on the same page that we were getting older and maybe it was time to try. So, enough about our love story, and let's begin with our fertility journey. I always thought it would be easy for me to conceive, as all the women in my family are fertile, but that was not the case for me. We had tried for a year and a half and nothing. Flo was playing with me. I would go months without Flo. I knew the problem was me, however, my husband thought he was a problem. Well, we went to the doctor to get checked, and the doctor at the time said I was overweight and if it was possible to lose 10 pounds. I said that's going to be hard, but I would do it. We left the appointment, and 2 months later, I was 10 pounds lighter. Then he said another 10 pounds. I rolled my eyes and said fine and lost another 10 pounds, but no baby and no signs of a period either. He gave me birth control to help with my cycle, and that only helped me hate my husband. I couldn't stand the man. I stopped taking birth control. I went a whole year with only one time getting my period that lasted for weeks. At one point, I thought I had miscarried because I was hemorrhaging. My husband rushed to the hospital, and for the first time, I heard the word PCOS. You have PCOS. I finally had my diagnosis. My periods were all over the place, and so was my weight. In January of 2016, I am a nail technician, and I had gone to take a one on one training with a fellow tech. We started talking, and I mentioned my husband and me had been trying to get pregnant for a few years. She asked me, "Would you mind if my pastor prayed for you?" I said, "Not at all," because the pastor was going to her salon to bless her salon. The pastor arrived, and once I saw her, I started to cry, and I couldn't hold my tears. She asked me, "What would you like for me to pray for?" I said, "My husband and I have been trying to have a baby, but the baby isn't coming." She started to pray for me and said, "The Lord wants you to know He will bless you with a baby. However, you have to forgive your husband with your heart." I didn't understand it at the time because him and me, we were doing fine, or I thought, okay. I received the blessing and knew God was going to bless us. Well, in 2018, no baby, and menstrual would come whenever, and the scale kept going up. I remember I was sitting in a pile of clothes that no longer fit me, but I refused to be a size 24. I remember I had met up with my friend earlier that year, and she told me she had gone to boot camp where she had lost a lot of weight. I called up that boot camp and made my appointment. The location was so welcoming, and the coach asked me what the reason was that I wanted to lose weight. And I said, well, one, because my clothes don't fit, but the most important one is that I have been trying to get pregnant for the past 6 years, and I have not been able to do so. And I don't want to ask myself, what if? She said the biggest reason you will use to keep pushing yourself. She said the problems are not the workouts, it's the food. And boy, she was right. She said a lot of people will start with you, but only a few will end with you. She said you will have to pay $500 and you'll lose 20 pounds in 6 weeks. I paid the 500 and I did my nutrition and I bought everything I had to buy. I went to my first class. I loved the workouts, but hated the food. On my second class, when I ended the class and went back home, I wasn't feeling well and I started to sweat and I got a fever. Turns out I was detoxicating myself. My husband said, "Quit." I said, "No." I gave them $500 and I'm getting my money back. The next day, I woke up feeling fine. So, 3 weeks into boot camp and 12 pounds down, and Aunt Flo decided to make an appearance after months of not seeing her. I was happy, jumping up and down. I know from that moment, my body was starting to do what it needed to do. Well, 6 weeks went by and I was down 22 pounds. I was so happy, and the coach asked me, "Are you doing another round of boot camp?" I said yes. I did another round of boot camp, but this time around, I only lost 18 pounds. I felt like such a loser. I lost my money. No baby. I said to my husband, "I feel like such a loser." He said, "What do you mean you're a loser? You're a winner who loses 38 pounds in 12 weeks. Feel proud of what you have done." He pumped me, and he was right. I stopped going to the boot camp and maintained myself in 2019. I remember I was showering and I had my period for weeks now. And I remember I was cramping really bad and my body released a clog that was huge. I thought I had miscarried. I grabbed it, but all it was blood. I mentioned it to my mother in law. We are very close this way. And she said, "Make an appointment with your OB." And I did. The OB asked me what was the reason I was there. I told her my period situation and the fact we wanted to be parents, and we have been trying for years now. We wanted to get pregnant naturally if that was possible. She said, "Let's do a biopsy to see what is really going on." She asked me if I had gotten a pap smear. I said yes in the beginning of the year. She said it was normal. I said yes. Well, she proceeded with the biopsy. She said, I'll be going on vacation. If everything comes back clear, I'll reach out to you when I get back. If not, I will reach out to you on my vacation. Well, I received that phone call 3 to 4 days later. Over the phone, she said, I am so sorry. You have endometrial hyperplasia, stage 4. You have to throw in the back burner wanting to have a baby. This is a very aggressive cancer. If you would have come 2 to 3 months later, we would have been talking about stage 2 to 3 cancer. Please stop by the pharmacy and pick up your meds, and we will see you in 3 months. See if the medication works or if we will have to do something else. Honestly, in that moment, I felt my soul leave my body. I was hearing what she was saying, but I was not listening, if that makes sense. I asked to leave early to pick up the meds, and I remember it was in the summer, and I sat in my car. I looked up to heaven, and of course, like a human that I am, I questioned God. I said, why me? Not what do you want me to learn about the situation? I was mad and resentful. And I also forgotten the promise he had made to me that I was going to be blessed with a child. I called my husband and told him over the phone. He was speechless and didn't know what to say to me. I called my mom and I told her if she could take me to pick up my meds, that I didn't want to pay for parking. I told her what the doctor said, and she was surprised I was calling her so early. She said, ask God to heal you. I said, I don't want to talk about God right now. She took me to pick up the meds. I got home. My husband was already home with my mother in law. I said, I need to talk to the both of you. I said to my husband, I will give you the divorce so you can look for that woman that can bear you the children you want. My mother in law, I want you to be present because I don't want people to think we split because he cheated or I did. He stood up and said, Johanna, I didn't marry you to bear my children. I married you for the good and the bad, in the riches and in poor, in sickness and in health. Right now, you are sick, and I will be there for you every step of the way. I said, okay, I want to be alone, and I went to my room. Days went by, and I remember he would play the song Waymaker. And one day he said, Joanna, God spoke to me, and he said, you are cured. I said, oh, really? Now you're a prophet. I was upset with everyone. Well, 3 months went by, and I remember after 3 months of being upset, when I was sitting in the waiting room, I was praying that everything would be fine. I asked for forgiveness. She performed the biopsy. A week went by, and I missed my phone call. I was so upset, but she left a message saying, good news. There are no signs of cancer cells. Continue with the medication, and I'm referring you to see a fertility doctor as we don't know what was impacted. This was November 2019. My husband and me decided to wait until 2020. We wanted to see how long it would take for us to get pregnant. Well, we all know what happened in 2020. COVID lockdowns in those months. I gained weight and I was finally able to get an appointment in September of 2020. Then we started with the testing for me and my husband. Of course, my husband was fine. It was me. The fertility doctor said I had over 60 polyps and my body had done a natural IUI on me. There was a big size polyp that was covering both sides of my tubes, and I was supposed to get them surgically removed. April of 2021, I was in the operating room for the procedure. My husband was able to come with me. The doctor said we will do local anesthesia, and as that is cooking, I will tell you a story of one of my patients. Her patient had been trying 4 years to get pregnant, and they couldn't. They had gotten a surrogate, and the couple decided to go on a baby moon before the arrival of their child. They went to Hawaii, and when they came back from their trip, they started to fix up the room for the baby, and she started to not feel well. So they made an appointment and did a pregnancy test, and it came back positive. Now she had two babies months apart. The doctor said, when the man from upstairs will bless you, he will bless you. And he sends it to women with fibroids or cysts. But because I was seeking men's will, it had to be clean. So she started the procedure, and once finished, she said, "You're good. Please get dressed and take a trip to Hawaii, and you never know. And you come back pregnant." We laughed, and my husband, we were thinking Canada. She said, "The moment you stop trying is the moment couples get pregnant." Well, when you're trying, that's the last thing you want to hear. Once everything was clear and I was good, I had the appointment with my fertility doctor, and she said, "Okay, here's the situation. Now, in mind, I've never really wanted to go through fertility treatment. I didn't think God needed help, and in my heart, it wasn't a route I wanted to go. But this was a way to get pregnant. I guess, right? In my heart, I knew I could get pregnant naturally. But, anyways, this is what the doctor said to me. "Okay, IVF, I'm giving you a 10%, IUI, 5%, but naturally it's a 1% chance." I said, "Please don't take this personally, but I can't seem to pay $50,000 on a maybe. I'd rather give that on a down payment to a house I know will be mine. So I will do IUI," and we did October 2021. That failed. I was hurt. I cried. My husband was also disappointed, and he said, "Book that flight to Canada. We have had a tough year. Let's get away." We flew out December 2021, where we were out there for New Year's. We came back. I got COVID again and had to isolate. We went back to our normal routine a few weeks later. I started not to feel well. I thought I had vertigo or high cholesterol. I was calling out sick, not feeling well. I remember I was sitting in my car when a voice said to me, "Take a pregnancy test." I said, "No, I'm done with that." It affected my mental health. So many negative tests. Plus, I don't ovulate. So many negative ovulation tests. And the doctor said, "You don't ovulate." The voice was very insistent to take the pregnancy test. I kept saying no. Finally, I said, "I will, but it will be from the Dollar Tree." I went and bought two tests, went home. I took a test and left it on the counter because I was too sleepy to look at what I knew was a negative test. I went to bed, and when I woke up, I remembered about the test. And I got up, and when I saw those two peak lines, I couldn't believe it. Right away, I text a picture of the test to my friend. I said, "Girl, what does this mean?" She says, "Girl, that means you're positive for COVID, LOL." I said, "No, fool, it's a pregnancy test." She said, "Congrats, you're pregnant." I said, "Girl, you were there with me. You know that's impossible." She said, "Make an appointment with your OB, and you can also take tests early in the morning. Those are accurate." I went back to the Dollar Tree and bought six more tests and picked up my mother in law from work. We got home and I asked her, I said, "Please do me a big favor." She said, "Yes." I said, "Can you take a pregnancy test for me?" I did a pregnancy test, actually two, and they both came back positive. And you know this is impossible. I told her my friend said to do them in the morning. She said, "Johanna, I'm not doing a pregnancy test." I was like, "Please, I need to make sure it wasn't a fluke." She said, "Listen to your friend and take them tomorrow." I said, "Okay, I'll have my dad take one." She said, "No, you will not. Do it tomorrow morning." I said, "Fine." Mind you, I did not tell my husband. I hid this from him. And anyone that knows me knows I can't hold a secret. It was the longest night of my life. As soon as my husband's alarm went off, he went to our bathroom. I went to my mother in law's bathroom and I did all six tests, and they all came back positive. I cried and thanked God 1,000 times. I went back to bed. As he gets up way earlier than me, I went back to sleep and woke up and got ready and made an appointment with the OB for the next day. I went to my doctor's appointment. It was the first one there, praying that the test would be positive and there would be a baby growing inside of me. Afterwards, newly parents were walking in with their newborn. I held my stomach, hoping there was a baby inside of me. I know, silly. I was the first one to get called in, and the nurse said, "Please grab that cup and leave it there. We will grab it." The nurse proceeded to ask me a million and one questions. The nurse asked the other nurse, "Can you please check the pregnancy test that is on the counter?" She said the positive one. She said, "Please check." She said, "Okay." A couple of seconds passed by, and that nurse comes in the room and says, "Congratulations." I started crying. She said, "Please don't cry. You have a whole team of doctors and nurses behind you." I said, "I promise you, I'm married." I'm crying because 4 months ago, I was literally across the hall in the fertility department crying because I couldn't conceive. She said, "You're on this side. Congrats." The nurse that was helping me said, when the man upstairs decides to bring you a blessing, it's always in his timing. All I would say is every single day, pray over your womb until your baby is earthside. That evening, I stopped by the store. I bought a gender neutral outfit and a birthday card that said, "Happy birthday to the father to be." And inside that, I placed the results. I got home and I said to my husband, "I know we are a month and a half away from your birthday, but I couldn't wait. Happy early birthday." He looked at me and said, "Okay." He opened the bag, looked at the PJs, and said, "This definitely will not fit me." I said, "Okay." Then he read the card, opened the results, and said, "Really? You're positive for COVID again? I will have to quarantine." I said, "Are you serious?" I said, "I'm pregnant." He answered, "Please don't joke like that." I said, "I'm not joking. I'm pregnant." He looked at his mother, and his mother nodded her head, and she said yes. He looked at me. He said, "Are you really pregnant?" I said, "Yes." I see tears coming down from his eyes, and he hugged me. He was extremely excited and happy. He said, "How?" I said, "I don't know, but God blessed us." The following week, I started to get cramps. I emailed my doctor, and she called and said to go to urgent care. She will feel better if I gotten checked. I went to urgent care. They withdrew blood and an ultrasound because I should have been 8 weeks, somewhere around there. The doctor said that those numbers had to multiply by two, that I had to go back 2 days later. When I got my results, the tech did not see a fetal sac or a fetal loop. I went back and my numbers did double. I remember I told my coworker and she said, "Well, they hide." I said, "Okay." Mind you, I didn't pay any attention in sex ed. There is nowhere to hide. My husband and I were more than excited to go see the baby, although I was worried because weeks prior they couldn't see anything. Due to COVID, my husband couldn't go in, just me. I went in. I see the doctor. He looked at my chart and he said, "Well, this is a little concerning because you went to urgent care. You must have been around 6 to 7 weeks so we can hear the heartbeat. Please don't record. Let's just make sure you're pregnant and it's not ectopic or a chemical pregnancy." I started praying and he did the ultrasound and it was just silence. All of a sudden, I see the nurse give me a thumbs up. I felt relieved, and seconds later, the doctor said, "Here it is. You are actually 7 weeks, 0 days. You ovulated late due to your last menstrual cycle. You should have been 9 weeks. However, today you are 7 weeks. Do you want to hear the baby's heartbeat?" I said yes. When I heard her heartbeat, it was loud and strong. He said, "You found out really, really early on. You are in tune with your body." 9 months passed by and I had to get induced. My baby was under distress and I had an emergency C section when I heard my baby cry. I was relieved. Thank God she was earthbound. She was born October 2nd, 2022 at 5:38 a.m. I was happy and tired. Let's fast forward to November 2024. I couldn't lose weight, so my doctor asked for me to go to the OB to make sure that I don't ovulate so I could start the weight loss treatment. The OB said, What the condition you have, the chances of me naturally conceiving was 0%. The doctor said the other doctor was generous to say 1% because it was really a 0% chance for me to conceive. She proceeded to do the biopsy and said, "We will be in touch in a couple of weeks." She called me and said, "Good news. You no longer have any cancer cells. If you would like to have another baby, you can. However, you could only have the baby through fertility treatment because naturally you can. Even though you have your daughter medically, she really should not have been here because you don't naturally ovulate." I said, "Thank you, but I will never go through fertility treatment again." Here we are. Baby girl will be 4 years old. I know this journey can feel lonely, but there is a community for us. But overall, pray and don't lose faith and hope. Remember, what is impossible for man is possible for God. It took us 10 years to conceive our baby, and she is the light of our home. Thank you for hearing my story. Thank you for listening till the end. I truly hope this testimony blessed you, uplifted your spirit, and renewed your hope. If it did, I invite you to share it with a friend or family member who may need encouragement. Post it to your socials or leave a review. Your support helps these stories reach the hearts of those that need it as well. This is more than a podcast. It's a safe space to be seen, heard, and uplifted. Until next episode, keep holding on to hope. Thank you for tuning into
Faith and Fertility Talks.